Right now, we're going to move on with some international news headlines from the press around the world with Diptyque Laurent. Hello there.
Hi, Kat.
And you're going to start us off with some views from the United States about the assault on Mosul.
That's right. The battle for Mosul has begun, Mosul being the beleaguered stronghold of the Islamic State group, as the New York Times reports. The city has, of course, been in the hands of the jihadists since June 2014. At the time, many people actually welcomed the arrival of the IS group because they were seen as the sort of Sunni saviors for the locals there to break free from the Shiite-led government. Of course, it's a different story now. But it's not just a battle for Mosul, it's a battle for Iraq. That's what the political analyst Hassan Hassan says in the Dubai-based The National paper. The reason being that Mosul is home to diverse populations. You have Turkmen populations, Kurds, Shia, Sunni, Christians. Each sees Mosul as the key to their long-term future, and how politicians decide Mosul after the Islamic State group will ultimately dictate Iraq's future as a whole.
And of course, newspapers all around the world reporting on this, and news organisations. The Arab language press, particularly interesting angle, seems to be pretty sceptical, about this battle.
Very sceptical. Visibly for the Iraqi paper Azaman, we haven't learned from our errors. The paper actually wonders why they're launching this offensive now, evoking the problems that already exist within the Iraqi army with diverging ethnic and religious interests. The Saudi paper Al-Ittihad focuses more on the foreign interests in this battle. Turkey, for instance, wants to sort of build a bridge with Iraq. Iran has a desire for vengeance against the Islamic State group, and the US is looking for a symbolic victory after years of failure in the region. So everyone's sort of got their vested interest there, and there's clearly a lot riding on this battle.
Indeed, nonetheless than for all those civilians here in Mosul, of course, who we mustn't forget. Let's move on, though, to a story from the Philippines. The President Rodrigo Duterte, we've talked a lot about him in the recent weeks, haven't we? He's quite a colourful character. He's embarking on a diplomatic trip to China. This is the first such trip by a Filipino leader in 5 years.
It's a really symbolic trip, Kat. One of the topics of discussion is the Philippines' sovereignty in the South China Sea, and especially those Scarborough Islands. While the Wall Street Journal says Duterte is rolling the dice in this Chinese embrace, it's a different story in the Filipino press. Clearly, Filipino diplomacy is moving away from China, away from the US and towards China. And this is a good thing, at least for the Daily Inquirer, a Filipino national newspaper. In its editorial, the paper says that the country has been under the influence of America for too long, but it does warn against what it calls the caveat venditor. Of course, it's a play on words of caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware. Caveat venditor means let the seller beware, saying that Duterte should be careful because any friendship with China comes at a cost, be it territorially, diplomatically, or economically. And the paper warns against entering what it calls what could be yet another submissive relationship. Now, for the writer in the China Daily, though, it's not as cut and dry as that. The writer says the U.S. should welcome this rapprochement because it's good for the region and especially for peace in the region.
All right, let's move across to a big news story in the United States. A lot of people very shocked about this. A young woman killed in a shooting. It just so happens that she's the daughter of the Olympic sprint champion, Tyson Gay.
That's right. It's really clearly an example of how gun violence has no limits in the U.S. The athletic world is mourning the loss of 15-year-old Trinity Gay. She was the daughter of US Olympian sprinter Tyson Gay. There she is. There they are together. The tabloid New York Daily News reports that she was shot overnight in Kentucky. She was, it appears, the random victim of a shootout that erupted between two cars in a restaurant. Unfortunately, she didn't survive from her injuries. And for the New York Daily News, I quote, Trinity Gay was in the worst possible place in America. She was somewhere. She was out late. Absolutely, took the bullet at around 4 a.m, but in the end, the hour doesn't matter and the neighborhood doesn't matter.
All right, let's end on a slightly different note. We've got an article that gives a bit of insight into why it's so hard for so many people to accept a compliment.
It's a really interesting article from Quartz. Basically, the writer says that giving and receiving compliments is merely a question of economics. So it's like giving something in return. Basically, when someone says, hey, I like your dress, you might feel inclined to say, oh, this raggedy old thing, you know, I got it from the secondhand store or so forth. And you feel sort of indebted to the compliment giver, and it's really a question of economics, and that's the reason we have trouble accepting compliments.
Well, I have to say it was a wonderful review of the international press. You accept the compliment, du petit colorant there. And we're